Reading from Exodus chapter 23, verses 10 to 13. For 6 years you shall sow your land and gather its yield. But the 7th year you shall let it rest and lie fallow, that the poor of your people may eat, and what they leave, the beasts of the field may eat. You shall do likewise with your vineyard and with your olive orchard. 6 days you shall do your work, but on the 7th day you shall rest, that your ox and your donkey may have rest, and the son of your servant woman and the alien may be refreshed. Pay attention to all that I have said to you, and make no mention of the names of other gods, nor let it be heard on your lips. Israel was an agrarian community who lived on the produce from their land. The weekly Sabbath reminded them that God was their provider and sustainer, and He gave them the ability to work and bring forth food from the land. God's sustenance was demonstrated by the provision of manna for 2 days in the 6th day of the week, so that they could rest on the Sabbath day. Unlike other days, the manna collected on the 6th day remained fresh rather than rotting. Thus, obeying God's instructions left them still experiencing God's provision even as they rested. Yet, there were some who still went out looking for manna to collect on the Sabbath, and God was angry with them. This passage describes the practice of Shemitah year, or the year of release. This is the basis of the sabbatical year, a rest period given by the employer for the worker to pursue other interests or enjoyments while retaining his job. The Sabbath year was designed to provide time for the land to renew itself and for the farmers and animals to rest. It was a time when the land became ownerless. There was no crop, only whatever grew on its own directly from God's hand. Nobody owned it, therefore, and anyone could eat from this produce. Rich and poor alike ate of God's bounty during this year from any part of the land. The stubble was left as such for the animals to eat. The field was not burned, weeded, sown, fertilized, or worked in any way. This reminded the people of God to acknowledge Him as the owner of the land, thank Him for His generosity, demonstrate their realization of this fact by giving up all right to the land or its produce for the whole year, sharing everything with those less fortunate. The year could be given over to any good purpose, whether study, travel, spiritual reflection, or community service. To the unbelieving question, how are we to live during this year? God answers that in Leviticus chapter 25, verse 20 onwards. And if you say, what shall we eat in the 7th year, if we may not sow or gather in our crop? I will command my blessing on you in the 6th year, so that it will produce a crop sufficient for 3 years. When you sow in the 8th year, you will be eating some of the old crop. You shall eat the old until the 9th year, when its crop arrives. It is amazing how God takes care to ensure their well-being in minute detail. Farmers did not really need to reap their grain. They could leave it completely to the poor, for their 6th year harvest would be so plentiful that they could live on it until the 8th year harvest came in. Deuteronomy 15 also speaks of the sabbatical year. In this passage, a further command is given. It says, forgive all debt and release all Hebrew servants. Everyone got a fresh start. If the Israelites obeyed this command, they had another promise. In chapter 15, verse 6, we read, "The Lord your God will bless you as he has promised. And you will lend to many nations, but will borrow from none. You will rule over many nations, but none will rule over you." Observing the sabbatical year was a sign of trust in the Lord, and it was accompanied by great blessings. Refusing to obey this command God warned would lead to a curse. He says in Leviticus chapter 26, 33 to 35, "I will scatter you among the nations, and will draw out my sword and pursue you. Your land will be laid waste, and your cities will lie in ruins. Then the land will enjoy its Sabbath years, all the time that it lies desolate, and you are in the country of your enemies. Then the land will rest and enjoy its Sabbaths. All the time that it lies desolate, the land will have the rest it did not have during the Sabbaths you lived in it." Sadly, Israel failed to heed to this command and observe the sabbatical years. They continued to farm their land in the 7th year, just as they had the other years. In the book of Jeremiah, chapter 34, verse 14, God says, "At the end of 7 years, each of you shall set free his Hebrew brother, who has been sold to you and has served you 6 years. You shall send him out free from you. But your forefathers did not obey me or incline their ear to me." When God brought the Assyrians and the Babylonians against Israel, and God's people were removed from the promised land for a period of time, the scriptures note the period for which the land would remain empty. We read in 2 Chronicles chapter 36, verse 21. The land enjoyed its Sabbath rest all the time of its desolation it rested. They had neglected the significant step of faith for 490 years. Instead of keeping 70 Sabbath years. At the time of exile, therefore, the land lay fallow for 70 years until God brought his people back. We cannot escape the consequences of our unbelief because God is faithful to his word. After the exile ended in the time of Nehemiah, the Israelites realized their folly in neglecting the Sabbath day and the Sabbath year. They vowed to walk in the ways of the Lord. In Nehemiah chapter 10, verse 31, we read, "As for the peoples of the land who bring wares or any grain on the Sabbath day to sell, we will not buy from them on the Sabbath or a holy day. And we will forego the crops the 7th year and the exaction of every debt." Just like the Sabbath day, the Sabbath year pictures God's tender concern for his creation, and especially for man made in his image. He doesn't want him to live in perpetual labor and bondage and debt. As we trust in God, we can boldly withdraw from our fleshly dependence on the works of our own hands. We can ask for our daily bread to be provided by our Father in heaven, even as we work hard at our occupations. We can rejoice that we have been released from every debt of sin by the Savior who rose again from death on the cross. We can release others from the supposed debts they owe to us. We can give each other a new start. We can recognize God as the owner of all that we have and are. This will help us freely share with the poor and needy, to let go of our selfishness and become like him. We can become generous and kind. The Sabbath rest is a shadow of the freedom and release that God provides to all those who labor and are heavy laden because of their sins and insecurities, the desperation to provide for themselves, the covetous grasping after earthly security and enjoyment. He lets us go free so that we can work for him. not for pay, but for love and for his approval and his eternal reward. Let us rejoice in the rest that God provides for all those who trust him enough to obey him. God bless.